Oh, thank God. Hi, Bob. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hi, Grace. Good to see you.
Okay, I'm so sorry about just me being so dramatic because literally I set the time as 10 p.m. Today. So it's a nightmare. I'm sorry
Well,
about that.
I'm glad this isn't. Not asking me to do it 10 o'clock tonight. That's for sure.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh God. Anyway, so I was listening to your book, Datapreneur. I felt like it was so interesting to hear about how the biggest tech companies were kind of like shaped. And actually, to start the show, I would love for the audience to learn more about you. So you grew up in the Midwest, and you came to Silicon Valley in the early 1980s. So your most recent job was you were the CEO of Snowflake, and then you grew the company from like 30 something people to over uh 1,300 people. And nowadays Snowflake is like the giants in the data space. So why don't we start with what were some early on core like childhood lessons that you've learned from your family to, help you become like a leader in the tech industry?
Well, I think I always learned from my parents that how important it is to really
Mhm,
work and focus on getting things done.
mhm,
And you don't succeed unless you really work at it. And you have to focus at school, and if you're in college, or if you're in high school or whatever, as you're growing up, to really try and do the best you possibly can.
mhm,
Be as good as you possibly can. And we can't all be great at everything,
mhm,
but we can find something we're really good at and then really focus on it. And I think that's something I did early on. I had an early interest in technology, read popular science and other things when I was a kid. Read pretty much everything that Isaac Asimov ever wrote, and he was a big influence in my life early on in the robotics novels.
mhm,
Went to University of Michigan, got a degree in computer science. Then from there moved to California, Silicon Valley in 1981, working for a company called ROLM, ROLM. They made PBX systems, telecommunication systems for business.
mhm,
ROLM had the first digital PBX, and so they were a pioneer and leader in their own way.
mhm,
And then joined Microsoft in 1988. And through all that period, I learned a lot from the people I worked with. People at ROM, who people like Paul Anderson, who was a mentor in so many ways to me and still is a good
mhm,
friend. Uh, at Microsoft, it was, I was so fortunate to work side by side with, Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer and many great people at Microsoft. Paul Moritz, who ran the early Windows and early things in the system side, was really probably my
mhm.
mentor in that time, but had a chance to learn a lot from a lot of great people.
Totally. I want to ask a little bit more about like the mentor side of things. So since I feel like you have built such a great like personal board of advisors, it seems like how do you kind of like number one, like you one thing you mentioned early on was about like, figuring out what is something you're good at. What was something that you're good at? And then like from the mentors that you're seeking, like are they people with similar strengths, or do you feel like you want to find the people that are kind of like complementary to your skill set?
Well, quite often mentors have very different strengths than you do, but you
Mhm,
can learn from them by watching what they do, even if
mhm,
you're very different. I mean, certainly I'm very different from Steve Ballmer,
mhm,
and yet I learned so much about how to focus on details of things to
mhm,
understand things in amazing depth. I mean, Steve was amazing. We used to have this thing at Microsoft called mid-year review, which was this horrible multi-week process that pretty much killed hundreds of people every year in terms of how much time and energy was spent. But Steve would go into these processes, and there was this thing called a rev sum, which was this 11 by 17 sheet of paper. We did
mhm,
everything on paper at Microsoft in those days, and it had literally 2,000 numbers on this sheet of paper. And it was about the business. It looked at the business from multiple perspectives and
mhm,
gave you numbers that compared this business in this region to other regions, and very very much it's basically a big Excel pivot table. And Steve would stare at that piece of paper and spend 2 minutes staring at it, and he'd say, "This is just bullshit because this number is wrong, and I know that everything is wrong because this number is wrong." At which point, like, the finance guy would start moving papers around and looking at this thing, and about a 10-minute
mhm,
conversation would ensue. And I have to tell you, 9 out of 10 times Steve was right and that
Mhm.
number was wrong. And from there, people learned about precision and getting things right. And that happened a lot of times at
Mhm.
Microsoft. So, that's sort of one dimension, and that's not who I am. I mean, my strength, you ask about strengths, my strength was really um, understanding and working with customers to understand what they need,
Mhm.
and then translating that need into something that was straightforward and simple and easy for people to understand and to execute on. I literally just got off the phone with one of my companies, the Julia folks, and they were talking about exactly this issue, that as they were entering into some new businesses in the pharma side, how the customers are asking for a lot of features and capabilities that they had not anticipated. And it really was about translating the old world where these pharma companies were
Mhm.
working into the new world of working with this new Julia Hub product. And that's a journey that I had taken many times before. And I just told them the story about how, Microsoft won with Excel. But when we won with Excel, when we started on Excel, the product that everybody used was Lotus 123.
Mhm.
And in order for Microsoft to succeed, we needed to run 123 macros. We needed to provide compatibility with that old world and then create a journey for customers to move into the new graphical world of Excel. And I've watched that story repeat itself multiple times in my career, helping customers go through a journey from where they are today to where they can be in the future with new products. And it's always a journey, and it always
Mhm.
involves understanding what customers are really dealing with, providing a bridge for them, and then translating that to the engineering and development teams so that they can understand what to do.
I have so many questions about like developing a core product just because I feel like you have to build something to offer through the world and then to see people's reaction. And then you have to like iterate many, many times. But what if you think your strengths or like what if like the things that you are very good at making is not like what people want? And then you have to keep making things that are kind of in the adjacent sector, but that's like I guess like how do you think about like, originally you wanted to build a product and then you take the market direction, which is like people are like actually asking for something that you are not building. But do
Yeah.
you just quickly build that thing or
So
do you pivot onto something that still focusing on your strengths?
I think, one of the things, I'm actually not the technical visionary that
Mhm.
dreams up the new widget, whatever that is. I mean, there are incredible people in this world that do this.
Mhm.
It's a lot of what founders are really good at is they have this idea of how they can do something that is transformative to the
Mhm.
world. And they are able to build, the kernel of it. They build the foundation of that typically. And certainly incredibly successful people like Elon Musk, this is what he's incredibly,
Mhm.
one of the things he's incredibly good at. But so understanding and starting from this incredible idea, that's actually not me. That's actually
Mhm.
not what I do. And I've
Mhm.
actually never done that. What I have done is worked with those people and help those people to shape their product into something that people can actually use. Because what I found is that, most of the time their initial vision, while 70% correct, has enough problems associated with it that people can't use the damn thing. And how do you take and go from where people are today in what they're doing to where you want them to get to? And that's a journey associated with that. And that's kind of where my superpower is, really deeply understanding the customer problem, understanding the possibility of the new technology, and then helping to bridge the gap between those two. And like I say, it's always a journey and it's always an iterative learning process. You never get it right the first time. I mean, you never just go, this is what we're going to do. And I mean, at least not in my experience. One of the, I mean, of course, I'm a Microsoft guy. So, one of the jokes about Microsoft is, it takes 3 versions for Microsoft to get it right. And that's actually
Mhm.
really true. I mean, typically Microsoft comes out with something, it's got a gem of the foundation of a great idea, but people can't really use the damn thing. And then the second version, kind of works for the developer or for some sophisticated people, but it's not really meant for mere mortals. And by the time the third version comes out, they get it right for the mass audience, and then they use their marketing and distribution machine to do what they do better than anyone, which is get that product out to millions of people around the world. And it's that iterative. I was always very instrumental in that iterative process of helping to refine the product and make it what people can really use in mass.
Mm. I think that's definitely a superpower to like actually listening to the customer. Um, Walk me through like what that look like to iterate. Like, so for example, let's say I'm like Julia computing, like, and then what would be your suggestion for me to like dominate the pharma industry? Is that just like
Sure.
you suggest me to talk to 5 customer first and then like we
Well, first of all, it's really about spending time with customers
Mhm.
and really ideally going to their site. I mean, we're now living in a new world where Zoom and technologies allow people to connect in ways they never could connect through most of my career. I mean, most video never worked for most of my career. And you really need video to actually make, even have a decent conversation with somebody. So you can do a lot over Zoom, but there's something, and it's great when customers come to visit you. But
Mhm.
honestly, there's nothing like showing up at their site and spending a few hours with the customer in their environment to really learn what the gestalt of that customer is, and understanding their value. Sometimes they have values on the wall. I always find that fascinating to see, and seeing how the culture of that company works. And so getting there and spending time with customers and hearing their problem. And customers are really good at telling you what their problem is and what you need to do to fix it. And what I found over time is the thing to really listen to is what the problem is and what they need, and then hear what they have to say about what to do to fix it, but only take that as input to them. Because probably half the time, or maybe more than half the time, the solution is not what the customer tells you to do. And so a good product manager hears the customer problem and then listens to the engineering architects and the people inside their company that have this vision of technology that they're building. And they translate the customer problem into a solution that is very often not what the customer had asked for in the first place. And so, so if you do that job right, what you do is you build something that is surprising to the customer in a great way. I mean, it's a positive surprise because they go, "Oh, I never thought of it this way. But now that I see this is so much better than what I was thinking. I was just telling you to do X, Y, and Z because that's the way we've always done it before. But this
Mhm.
new way is so much better." And that's really what you need to do to be a successful product manager.
Okay, so let's say I'm the customer and then you are the product builder. What would be like your top 3 question to ask me? We could use any product you have in mind. Let's say like, I don't know, the
I
meeting
mean,
app
first is
or
tell me what, tell me about what tell me, first of all, let me understand your business. Tell me about what your
Mhm,
business is and understand how you operate your business. What are your key problems that you're facing?
mhm.
And what do you think we can do to help you solve those problems? I mean, that's as basic as you sort of can get. And then but mostly there's 100 other questions from each one of those questions. And honestly, that top level question is just
Mhm.
a goal of getting the customer to start talking. And then it's the probing detailed questions that actually lead you to understand in depth what the customer problem really is and provide you with the insight that lets you know how to translate that into a solution.
Totally. What if people are telling you one thing, but you are hearing something else? And like, I guess like also, I guess the main question is like, or what if like the customer tell you something unrealistic, like they want to use $1 to buy this, like
They always
they
tell
want
you
to, yeah.
something unrealistic. I mean, it's not always, but a lot of customers are they are not there. They don't have clarity as to what they want. And again, this is again, I think this is what a great product manager does is that they ferret out and understand what the real issue is that customers have, and then look inside their own organization and inside the products that they're providing and determine how to shape those products to actually meet that need. And let me give you the Julia example. I was just out of the phone just an hour
Mhm,
ago. I had this where
mhm,
we went into this customers. We actually work with a partner on building a solution for pharmas, an engine, a solution for drug development, and this partner's called Pumas, and the expectation was we were going to build this platform to host Pumas, so that you could solve these problems using this new technology. That Julia is a language, but it's an engineering modeling language, and it's incredibly powerful, modern, new language. And the Pumas team had turned that into a solution for helping to do drug development and discovery. And we had focused when we first started building Julia Hub that we would just host this new product in a way that allowed for customers to have incredibly good, efficient workflows, to be able to save their work, which is one of the requirements of the pharmaceutical industry, and really work in a totally different way. And we got in and we started working with these pharma customers, and they're saying to us, we have all these other tools. We have R, we use Windows a lot. They wanted us to host Windows for them. They want us to run R, which is a language that, it's in a way a competing language. They want us to host that. And we're doing that work. We're doing that work to help them, because what they've said is we want to live inside this Julia Hub environment and work with these other products. But the engineering is like, what are we doing? Why are we working on these other products? We're trying to build the new thing. What about this old, why are we doing this old stuff? Well, it's not surprising, because we have to build a bridge for those customers. And one of the key things we were just talking about was we use Git as a way of saving the state of the system, and doing so in a way that's reproducible and everything. And the customers are like, well, we want access to the Windows file system. And we're like, what? You want to need access to the file? That's the old way of doing things. And my position is, well, of course we need to host the Windows file system. And whether we use NFS or SMB is a question that we need to work with customers, what the technology is. But of course we need to host that, because customers need a bridge from the old world to the new world. And it's our job to help them with that bridge. And if we do our job right as product managers, we can help them to provide workflows that move them from that old way into the new way, and encourage them to operate using Git and the modern technologies. And that's the magic. That's the magic of how you win and build a giant business. And is that you help customers, and you understand customers where they are, and then show them the promise of what can be, and provide them to bridge to get there. And, this is a company that's a young company. It's got incredibly great technology, the Julia team, the Julia Hub team. And, they have this incredible opportunity to do that. And to me, it's one of the most magical things you can do in software, is to help customers move forward.
I wonder, I really love that. Like, it is your job to kind of like figure out the solution for the customer to a degree. And then, like, I wonder, I want to switch gear a little bit before, like, we keep talking about the product and go to market side of things. You have a very successful career at Microsoft, Snowflake, Juniper. I wonder, when you are thinking about early on in your career, how do you differentiate yourself versus like the thousands of developer managers or program managers before you become the president of the company? You are like one of the 4 people reporting to the CEO. Like, among your 23 years career at Microsoft, like, how do you kind of like play your strength to get to the top? And by the way, hi Vinish. We're going to talk about your question at the end. But anyway,
That's great.
Yeah.
So I mean, to me, I guess what I would say is in the end, it's all about leadership, and how you can become a leader in an organization. And I mean, the definition of a leader in some ways is the simplest thing in the world. It's somebody that people follow and will listen to. And one of the interesting things about Microsoft in the old days, I think this is still true today, is that the job of program manager, we call it product manager today, but back then we called it program manager. It was a small team. I mean, you might have 5 people on your team, something like that, and the engineering team has 50 or 100 people on it, and the sales team has many more people. There's all these different groups that are much, much larger than you, and you actually have no we used to say that it is all of the responsibility with none of the authority. And so you had no authority. You were vested in immediately. You're given no authority to actually get changes made and have your and to influence people. You had to earn that influence. You had to generate to gain respect from people, and in order to do that, you had to demonstrate the value that you provided. And so it was really about being able to demonstrate that value to everyone else so that they would listen to you. And I mean, ultimately, leadership is a simple thing in a way. It's incredibly difficult to achieve, but it's a simple thing. Leadership is about having a strategy that is going to succeed. If you don't have a successful strategy, if your strategy is wrong, you're going to fail. There's no question about it. And strategies are never perfect, so they're always iterative and they're always evolving over time because you learn new things, and those new things help you to understand, what's right and what's wrong. It requires a structure, an understanding how to have people be structured and work together. Some of that is organizational structure. Some of it is process and having the underlying business processes and business systems to support what you're doing. If it's just a free for all, it doesn't work. It never works. People have tried that a bunch of times. It never works. You need to have a structure that enables people to operate effectively and work together. And then you need the right people. You need to have the right people in the right jobs. And if you've done those three things as a leader, you have the right strategy, you have a successful and effective structure, and you put in place the right people, you have a really good chance of succeeding. You don't always succeed because sometimes luck is involved and timing is involved. And, quite often you get the timing wrong on something. One of Microsoft's classic mistakes was to be too early on things where the market wasn't ready for something, or there was some missing pieces of technology. So you can still whiff even if you have all those things. But without those three things, you're pretty much guaranteed to fail.
I like what you said about strategy, structure, and the right people. I want to focus two part of the story here. One part is at the beginning you said earn the influence, right? And then number two is demonstrate your value, the value that you provide. There's a separate question on that. It's number one, when I was listening to your book, I feel like you can recall a lot of the details very vividly. Do you keep a work diary to be hey, here's the strategy I implement, and then this is the result, and then if the result was good, you're hey, Bill, by the way, here's my result for XYZ, or what's your way to demonstrate or tracking your influence or tracking the impact that you have made for the company, and also reflect that to the management team to be hey, here's what I have accomplished, or you feel that's not the right way to go?
Well, I'm not a note taker. I mean, I actually have
Right.
great respect for people who take notes and keep a diary and do all those things. I have a
How
lot
do
of
you remember everything for the book? I'm
I
I'm
guess
so
I could.
impressed.
There's some things I remember and some things I don't remember. I'm terrible. If it would, I'm not great with names of people. My mind will look at it. People say, "Do you know so and so?" I hear this all the time. Do you know so and so? And I'm like, let me check the LinkedIn profile and look
Yeah,
at the
yeah, I have to
picture of
see
the
their
person.
photo, yeah.
If I see the photo, I can tell my mind will connect it, but the name is not so good. Not so good in my head. So
Same,
I have some
same.
very strong weaknesses because I hate that.
Mhm.
But there's some things I can remember, and I certainly remember, the high level points at least of what I learned throughout the process, plus some of the detailed, things that happen. When I look back at Microsoft, I say this, I joke about this, is that, in general, I look back with rose-colored glasses and think about, the old days and what it was like in the 1990s when we were growing and incredibly successful. And then when I think about it a little more, I'm like, actually, there were a lot of problems along the way. It was not quite as rosy. It was not quite as rosy. And, I've said many times that, I have seen, at Microsoft, I saw the good, the bad, and the ugly, the true ugly. And, for sure, the DOJ case, which I was one of the witnesses of, I was one of the 12 witnesses that had the amazing, the incredible luck to testify in front of Judge Jackson. That was the ugly when we were being, basically attacked by the U.S. government. And when you're attacked by the U.S. government, you cannot win. I mean, there's no way to win.
Um, I want to talk about something like happier. So like one thing is like you mentioned about like strategy, structure, and the right people. Let's talk about strategy. So you have helped successfully like launch SQL Server. Um, why don't we talk about what was the right strategy and how do you kind of like structure it, and then how do you find the right people for it?
Well, what SQL Server is sort of a classic for what Microsoft does well, which is Microsoft sure as heck didn't invent the SQL database. I mean, they sure as
Mhm.
heck didn't. I mean, they were pretty late to market. SQL Server didn't hit the market until 89, 90, and really it started becoming a decent product in the mid 1990s. Um, uh, so there were other products in the market. IBM invented it with originally System R and then DB2, and of course the big kahuna in the market was Oracle. Still is a big player in that market. But what Microsoft did better than anyone else is they built a product that could be used broadly by companies that would never be able to use an Oracle or IBM database, or there was many others back then, Informix, a whole lot of others back then. Those were all more complicated. They ran on mini computers. We made a database that could run on an inexpensive Windows server. And what that did is it opened the market up to implement business systems for companies of all sizes. Go back to 1990, and if you walked into a dentist office, it was all pencil and paper. I mean,
Mhm.
the records were pencil and paper, the billing was pencil and paper. That's how people did it back then. And honestly, it was Microsoft technology that transformed that in companies and allowed companies that before could never use or afford, the back end business systems to actually use those business systems. And we built the foundation for those business systems, and then literally hundreds, thousands of ISVs, software developers, built applications that were vertically targeted to different industries.
Mhm.
In many cases, small veterinarian offices, plumbers. I mean, you name it. All these different offices had custom software built by many different companies, but it all had the commonality that it pretty much all ran on Windows Server and SQL Server, and then it used tools like Visual Studio and Visual Basic for the front end to it. That, of course, evolved to the web, and a lot of things have changed since then. It's now all being delivered as services, but it was that foundation that made it work. And what we had to do was make a system that took the capabilities that were only available to large customers with expensive systems and make it work in a smaller environment. And of course, we benefited from the fact that Moore's law was making systems ever more powerful. So you could do things in 1995 that you couldn't dream of doing in 1985.
Mm. I wonder when it comes to like you mentioned about like, when Microsoft launched the SQL Server, it was um a little bit late. I wouldn't say late, but like it's not the first or anything. And then you mentioned about like, they are building it for it's like the business system for a company of all sizes instead of just a big or small or something. So those are like the major changes. When you're thinking about the business landscape in today's world, since you're also on the board of like Pinecone or like any like a bunch of other great companies, um, I have like two part of the questions. I'm sorry, my mind is like all over the place. One part is like, how do you identify which company will become like a new Microsoft? Is that the OpenAI of the world? And then what would be the business strategy you leverage to, you think they should leverage to kind of like take out, do like, the pull off like the Microsoft of today's world?
Well, first of all, there are very few new Microsofts. Let's
Mhm.
just start with that. I mean, if you look historically over time, you've had, there's Microsoft, Google, Facebook, you
The
know,
FANG company, basically.
there's not that many. There's only
Right.
a handful. Maybe OpenAI has that capability. I mean, if I look in today's world, I would say, well, one of the companies that might have that potential is OpenAI
Mhm.
today. When I looked at Snowflake, I mean, probably the best example was when I went to Snowflake, which where when I first interviewed with the founders, Benoit and Terry and Chris Degnan, who ran their sales team and still runs their sales team, I recognized that what they were doing was, I was very familiar with databases. I worked in the SQL Server. I had a lot of experience in that. And I realized what they were doing was something that nobody else had done before, which is they were building a system that scaled
Mhm.
that had the potential to scale to meet the needs of companies of any size, the largest companies and largest organizations in the world, on literally a single instance of Snowflake. And that just nobody was able to do that before. And it was not possible technically to do that until the cloud came out. And what those founders had the brilliance to figure out is that by leveraging the cloud, by separating compute from storage, where it both could scale independently, you could support unlimited data sizes, as much data as you possibly want, and you could have as many users as you want working simultaneously against the same data at the same time. Nobody had ever done that before. And I realized that had the potential to build a giant business.
Mhm.
Now, how big is still to be determined. I mean, if you look at today's world, Snowflake has become a material force in the world. It's a big company. It has a major impact on things, but it's still no Microsoft. Could it become a Microsoft? Yeah, it potentially could. It's a tough journey to get there, but maybe it doesn't quite get that far, but maybe it's still a major platform in the world that people use. And it was because in this case, they had a foundation of doing something unique and powerful that was of great need for everyone. And they're able to leverage that in a broad way. Microsoft did the same thing in the early days. I mean, they were able to take fundamentally the capabilities that previously only existed on very expensive computers, mainframes and mini computers, and make those capabilities work effectively on inexpensive personal computers. And when I joined Microsoft, our vision was, our mission was, a desktop on every computer in every home running Microsoft software. And it was interesting because that was our mission, and we focused on that really for the first 10, 12 years that I was at Microsoft. And then something miraculous and disastrous happened, which was we achieved the mission. We actually achieved it by about 2000. We had pretty much achieved that there was a computer in every desktop in every home. And Microsoft spent a number of years, I think, lost a little bit in the wilderness, trying to figure out what their new mission is. And really, I think Satya helped to drive that forward. And now, they have this world of being a services company that focuses on a broad set of things for, empowering people, everywhere, using the fundamental cloud technologies. And so that, again, it's this journey based on an idea that you eventually evolve to achieve fruition, and then to continue to improve from there.
100%. I want to ask you another question about back in time, we'll talk about maybe one more Microsoft question and then we'll migrate onto Snowflake. One thing I found really interesting is you said about um at the beginning the goal was to have everyone have a computer in every home. And then in the 2000s, you guys achieved that after call it 20 years or so. Um, or 15 years. So I wonder throughout the different goals, how do you set a goal that big and then achieve it in the first place? I'm sure tons of AI company right now wants everyone in the universe to use their product. Obviously there's the big wave of technology, people were starting adapting into it, the world become more connected and some other adjacent company exists to help Microsoft to get there. But can you share more about first of all, how do you set up goals each year to achieve to get there? And then do you produce do you manufacture the computer first? Do you sell first? Do you what's the kind of actual strategy to even achieve that, there's a computer in every home? That's
Yeah, I
kind
mean,
of
you do it
crazy.
in phases. I mean, there's companies should have a mission. I mean, I think it's important for companies to have a mission, that there is a long-term goal, which in some cases is never achieved. I mean, if you look at Google's mission, I mean, it's the greatest mission of all time. I mean, I look at Google's mission. It's, it's to make the world's information and knowledge universally accessible. I got the words a little wrong, but it's
Right,
just
right, yeah.
to take all of the knowledge in the world and make it accessible to everyone.
Right.
You can never fully achieve that. And yet, damn, they've done a pretty good job. I mean, they've done a really good job in so many ways of working towards that mission. And I mean, I look at missions a lot, and I think that's always the one I highlight as being the most amazing one. Then you have a vision, which is more of a 2 to 3 year, maybe up to 5 year sort of time frame horizon that you want to focus on things, because you have to break things down. Excuse me.
Bless you.
You have to break things down and into chunks that are more consumable to people. So you say, okay, this is, if you looked in the early days of Microsoft, it was DOS. Well, go back to the very beginning. It was basic. I mean, that's what started. As a language company, and then we expanded that to an operating system called DOS. And then we began to build an application business with Word and Excel and things like that. And that DOS turned into Windows through a very laborious process. We had this distraction called OS2 along the way. You go through periods where you're focusing on, making the IBM PC successful. And then it's making Windows successful and building an ecosystem around Windows. And Microsoft chose, as a part of the way they did that, to engage with partners very closely and to build large ecosystems of partners and establish themselves as being a partner-centric company. And I say to this day, they're still the most partner-centric company the world has ever seen. And then leverage pieces like that, which are more tactics along the way, but then they become long-term parts of the foundation of what you're doing. And Microsoft has partners, for 30 years. Like Dell is still an incredible partner of Microsoft. And yet when you meet with Dell, I mean, I always just say this, when you meet with Dell, it was all about the next quarter. It was the most tactical, it's about partners are tactical in some sense. And to me, the Dell Microsoft one is the best example, because it's been a partnership that's lasted and endured for 30 years, and it's incredibly strong. And yet it's always focused on what they can do together this quarter and the next quarter. And I think that's part of the reason why it's so successful. So you break it down from a mission to visions to specific execution things that you can do in the next quarter or the next 6 months to actually affect and improve things for your customers. And you have to constantly iterate on that. Hopefully your mission does not change. Hopefully your mission is enduring and lasts through the lifetime of the company. The vision definitely does change over time, but it should change, on 3-year sorts of cycles or something like that. But what you actually are doing day to day to achieve those things, changes, on an ongoing basis.
Has Microsoft ever been in a place that's like, wow, the talents are expensive? Why I'm asking is, like, now you're on the board of like so many startups, and you have like run one very successful startup into one of the biggest company in the world. How do you think about like recruiting the best people? And when we could start with like how you pick to join Snowflake. I'm sure there's like a 4,000 other company that you could join at that point after being the president of Microsoft. Like, I think you can just join any company you want at that point. Why Snowflake? And then, how do you grow from like a 30 something people team to like thousands of people?
Well, I mean, I joined Snowflake because of what I said before, because when I met with the founders, I realized that what these guys were creating, if it was successful, and by the way, it wasn't clear it was going to be successful back then, because the dang product wasn't working at that point in time. It was still too early to really know for sure that the product was going to work. But I knew that if it did work, it was going to make a massive difference in the world. And from what I could tell the founders, knew what they were doing. I quizzed them on what they were doing and how they were building it. And I went, darn, if this thing works, it's going to be a very big deal. And what they did made sense to me. In terms of hiring people, it's always a process, and you seek out the leaders and the key people in your organization that can be transformative, and you take time sometimes to find those people and work on it over time. And probably Bill Gates is probably the most effective at this as anyone I've ever seen. Bill would recruit key engineering leaders and key technical leaders for years. And, sometimes they didn't join for 5 or 10 years. And, but he would continue to work them, and, and they would go through various ups and downs in their career. And eventually in many cases, we was able to get people from the, other parts of the industry into the company that he wanted to get. So you recognize where you have gaps and holes in your organization. You look to fill that with key leaders who are, A players who can then hire teams behind them to actually help them achieve what their goals are. And that's what that's certainly what we did at Snowflake. And I think that, and they've now grown that, that company grew. When I say there are 30 people when I got there, 0 revenue when I got there. And when I left, it was about 200 million and about 1,200, 1,300 people. Now they're much larger, and they focused on continuing to do that.
I think that's a really critical place to be in, to grow from like a 30 people to 200 million revenue and like over 12 to 1,300 people. That's like a huge leap there. I wonder, who was your first hire when you enter Snowflake? And then since you were not the founder, how do you quickly understand their kind of like struggle, challenges, slash how do you even know the product was gonna be built? Like you mentioned in the first place, like you were just really buying in onto the vision, then like or like the mission, vision, or just in general the vibe, but like it was not like the product was like already super solid. Do you build the product first? Do you recruit like the go-to-market team? Like what's the whole situation like? How do you hire the first person basically?
Well, when I joined Snowflake, some of the foundation of the company was in place. The engineering team,
Right.
the founders that hired the core of the engineering team. We actually had a head of sales that was hired before me, and Chris Degnan,
Yeah.
magically and amazingly is scaled all the way through. I mean, that's literally unheard of. But Chris had the capability, very unique person, had the capability of he's literally hired every single salesperson that Snowflake ever hired. I mean, he's been hired in his team. And that's pretty amazing. When I joined, I started building out the rest of the team, building out finance, because we didn't have anyone in finance. Adding product support, because we were starting to launch the product. We needed a product support organization. Product management, getting product management in place, because we didn't have a product team. And the engineers. The good news about what we were doing is that the engineers had a spec to work from. It was called SQL. And they knew what the functionality of the product had to be. I mean, people have been building SQL databases for 40 years. So they knew what the functionality was. And they had this different way of delivering it from an architectural perspective. But it was defined. Now, the details of how that product takes shape, what the user experience looked like, how we sold the product and priced the product, those were all things that I focused on and helped to fill out.
How do you price or sell a product?
Pricing is an art, and it's different for every company. A lot of people, I built the pricing model personally for Snowflake. When I joined, there was just confusion as to what to do. Nobody knew what to do, and Snowflake was different because it was clearly a usage-based product, and we weren't the first usage-based product. AWS, in some ways, pioneered that idea when they came to market earlier. But our product had different characteristics, because AWS was providing static capabilities by and large. You would provision a server, and they charge for a certain amount per server, and generally speaking, that server ran for a long period of time. Snowflake had this idea of being very dynamic, in that you could add capability, add functionality to add more processing power dynamically at any point in time, shrink it at any point in time. And so we needed a pricing model that had that dynamic sort of structure to it. And that's where we really built the credit model that's still in use today. And fortunately, I had the benefit of being involved in pretty darn near every Microsoft enterprise product pricing discussion that happened over a 20-year period. So I had a ton of experience in that. And I, and I see a question from me. I should be any framework for pricing books. Here, I'll take a second here. I'll show you because you asked this question. I'll show you my pricing. Can I share? Is it possible for me to share things?
You can go to present, and the
Okay.
bottom there's like the number 4 is present.
Okay. I'll take a second to show you this. And this is what I say to everyone, and it's really a very simple little slide. But so share screen,
present. So it's mute, stop cam setting, present. So the present one it's like the little plus sign.
I'll just share screen.
Yeah. So it's called present.
I see it now. Okay, great. Got it. I got it. All right.
Okay. I put it on stage.
Do you see that now?
Yes.
Great. So this is, this is what I talk to everybody about pricing, and it's a simple thing, which is, you need to price whatever you're doing based on customer perception of value. And you typically have 1 or 2 key metrics. 1 is the best number. Sometimes you need 2. If you need to get much more beyond 2, don't get more beyond 3 for sure. Just a couple of key metrics that allow you to scale your pricing. And the kind of examples of metrics are number of nodes, number of users. Subscription is very well trod one. It's often the best one to use. In the case of Snowflake, it was this idea of credits, which is a dynamic model. So you needed that. Your price must reflect any material COGS you have. A lot of products don't have material COGS. The COGS aren't that big of a deal, so they don't affect the pricing. At Snowflake, they really affected the pricing, keeping it as simple as possible. Pricing only gets more complicated over time. Treating pricing as a key product feature. A lot of times engineers want to treat it as an afterthought. That is a mistake. It needs to be part of the core engineering feature set, and the service itself needs to measure that. And then, you need to have a standardized pricing where discounting is standardized based on customer usage, the size of the annual customer commitment. And then finally, you need this needs to be consistent across everyone with allowing your field some capability to discount, but doing so in a consistent way. At Snowflake, we created a bunch of pricing levels and discount levels based on the size of customer commitment. And our field could immediately provide 1 level. They could go down 1 level in that and provide a discount 1 level as they sold. Beyond that 1 level, they needed different degrees of approval, either from more senior people in sales, or ultimately myself. And I was often the person that was at the last minute that people were trying to get a discount, and I would, work with them to understand whether the discount was right or not. So the principles are not that hard to understand, but they're very hard to apply, and they're very much dependent on the product. Every product is different. And one of Microsoft's superpowers was to take and homogenize all of this into these bundles like Office or or the server products had all these things together, or Windows had a whole bunch of things together, and you very simplify these things. And that technique, that technique of doing things in a consistent way was something I very much learned over time.
Quick question on that. Oh, by the way, do you have a few more minutes? Just because
I can do a few more minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, because we start a little bit late. So when it comes to not bundling, and like, I guess like one question is like, you mentioned about like, it should be simple enough. And like, I wonder for the customer journey, I feel like normally when people are selling like a software product, it's always like a long journey. Like you hear about them and then you like send like a quote or something. And then there's also the ones that are like, you can just buy by 1 click. How should you think about like, creating the buyer experience? Is that like you just send people like a Stripe link or like a PayPal link or something and be like, hey, buy here? Or like you have like a page that's like people can just one click and put in their credit card and then buy? Or how do you
You know,
think about like the
it depends on the
closing?
complexity of the product, right? I mean,
Right.
it took us a long time at Snowflake before we had the ability to purchase off the website
Yeah.
and the ability to do on-demand, acquisition of the product. But it was because the product took time to mature to the point
Mhm.
where it was usable by people without instruction and without facilitation from our,
Mhm.
our sales engineering team. So in the initial days, everything was done in coordination with sales engineering, and we had to activate customers. They were the only ones who could activate customers. When the product matured, we could allow people to do it online on the web. I look at products like Fivetran, which is become, Fivetran is a data transfer product, an ELT product. And it's such a simple product to set up. It's just very, very simple to use. Very powerful product, but very simple to set up. And they've been able to build a very significant product-led growth motion where there's no interaction by the sales team, because it's very easy for customers to begin to use that product. But a lot of products, at least the products that I tend to work with, use the example of Julia Hub. That's all being done through engagement with the direct sales team at some fundamental level. You have to, you need to have a product mature to a point where you can do click and buy. But in the meantime, what you do is you use your sales team and your sales engineering team to help to facilitate the adoption of customers when they're in the early stages.
You also mentioned about bundling. What does that kind of look like? So when you, I mean, of course, Microsoft
Microsoft
has,
is the king of
yeah,
this. They're the king
yeah.
of this. No one has done it as well as Microsoft does. And it's taking different products that have some commonality and making them work together where the whole is more than the sum of the parts. And Office is as good an example of this as anything, where when you go back to like 1990, people bought a word processor, they bought a spreadsheet, they bought a presentation package, and they did all those things, and they were all separate. You got them from different companies: WordPerfect, Lotus, Harvard Graphics. Those were the three big ones back then. And what Microsoft did is they said, we'll put all of these things together in one product, call it Office. We'll make them work together better. A lot of it's an actually engineering statement where it's not just three totally disparate products that work differently. No, we're going to make them all work exactly the same way, with the same toolbars, the same user interface across everything, and make sure that they can seamlessly interoperate and share data between them. That was a journey we went over most of the years. But the first thing we did is we put the products together in a pricing bundle and called it Office, and came out with a price where the whole product together, the three different products together, were basically the price of one of the other products. So we gave customers a very strong discount. That's kind of a about empathy. It's understanding what the customer needs are and providing them with a better product at a better price. And then, over time, Microsoft made Office better and better. And now they have the more sophisticated strategy where they offer different levels of service that they can provide for different customer segments, like consumer, and small business, larger businesses, really large enterprises that have very complex needs, and they charge different prices for those different products. But if you actually look at those products, they all build on each other. It's the Russian doll model, where you have the baby product that's encapsulated by another product, encapsulated by another. As you go up the pricing thing, you gain functionality, but you never lose functionality. And you don't buy things one off; you buy them all together in a bundle. And I like that structure. I learned it from the best at Microsoft.
I love that. I want to be mindful of time. I want to keep maybe like one like a separate major section, and then we do like a quick 1 minute fire run. Um I wonder when it comes to, since like I have, oh god, I have so many questions about the Microsoft era because we haven't jumped straight up into Snowflake yet. But like let's talk about, like, let's say when you first started at Snowflake, I guess like from the product perspective, what would be the core product that you were envisioning when you first meet the team? There's like the technology there, and how do you kind of differentiate among the tech giants back then, and how did it kind of evolve into Snowflake today
I mean,
from
Snowflake's, our founders knew they were building a cloud data warehouse. We
Mhm.
called it, the data warehouse built for the cloud. That was eventually the term we used. And they had that vision from day one, and they knew what they could do that was different and differentiated. Any size of data, any number of users simultaneously. Nobody else could do that. And doing that was of great value to customers. And that was the foundation of the product. Now, over time, we recognized there were other things we could do with that, like data sharing data between customers. And that was uniquely implemented because of the architecture that Snowflake had. You couldn't do that on any of the other products. And so we were able to introduce those ideas to customers to be able to work together and share data. And now, of course, they think of it as a complete data platform where they provide a broad set of different services to customers to solve their overall data needs. Now, Snowflake doesn't do everything. If you want to get data into Snowflake, you probably are using a product like Fivetran or Informatica or something else to get data in. Snowflake doesn't replace your Tableau or your Power BI or whatever your BI tool is. So they built a platform that works well with other vendors, and in fact have become a very ecosystem platform friendly company. I mean, that DNA, I feel like I had a major impact on that DNA because the founders didn't operate that way. Oracle was never a partner. It's not a huge partner company. It's not a bad partner company, but not like Microsoft was. And some of the people I brought in, some of the ex-Microsoft people, had that strong partner-centric DNA, and of course, I had it in my blood. And so they've become a company that's building an overall platform that allows other companies to build on top of them. And I think that's going to be key to their success. But we couldn't start there. We had to start with a data warehouse that was highly differentiated in order to build and create this platform that others could use in a variety of ways.
How do you become a platform company?
You recognize first and foremost that you're not going to do everything, and you work with others in the industry, and you build relationships. I always say there's no such thing as a strategic partnership. Dell and Microsoft have had a 30-year tactical partnership. It's my best example. Every time you try and build strategic partnerships, you do all this crap. It always never works. Never works. What works is to operate together that benefits everyone. And you basically need three things to build a relationship, a partnership with somebody. You need an executive relationship where people can work together and call each other if there's a problem, because there's always problems. And that eventually things like that need to be brought up to senior people to get them resolved. So you need an executive relationship. You need to have a product foundation where both products work together. And I always say it's 1 + 1 = 3. You need two products that work better together than either product similarly. And then you need a field and go-to-market relationship where the field can work together to help benefit each customer. I mean, my best example of this historically, and it's gone on and off over time, is there's a company called Citrix, which built on top of the Windows base to do Windows desktop remoting. And we built the foundation in Microsoft for remoting the Windows desktop to other computers. But there was a bunch of features we never did that enterprises needed, security, a whole bunch of other things. And we would work with Citrix to do that. And Citrix would provide that capability. And Citrix made more, their revenue was higher than our revenue on this was. But ultimately, Microsoft made as much profit or more profit than they did because we didn't have that much resource focused on this, and they took the whole cost of sales off of us. So in that case, the partners were benefiting each other. It was a clear case where we had strong executive relationships. I knew the executive leadership team. I met with them every quarter. They called me when there was a problem, and I called them when I had a problem. We had products that worked better together than separately, and then the field worked well because they both benefited and they both met quota. We're able to sell because the Citrix products added value to the Microsoft products. And that's just one example of dozens and dozens of examples that Microsoft has had, but it's one that I was very actively involved in.
I wonder, how does like a smaller company partner with like a Microsoft? Just because I know that you just mentioned about this example, it's kind of like a mutually like beneficial thing. It's like Microsoft is never gonna build like a super sophisticated like features on top of when
You
those
start
like,
by doing something. You start by doing something that Microsoft is probably not going to do. I mean, if you're building some core, functionality, word processing, et cetera, partnering is going to be difficult. Something that Microsoft is going to need, going to need to build on their own. So you do something that Microsoft won't do, at least for a really long time. So you add value to Microsoft. And one key way is verticals. Verticals are almost always an opportunity. So if you're building, like I say, an application for a different kind of manufacturing customer, or a medical customer or something like that, those are all examples of things that Microsoft's unlikely to do, and there's benefit to that. You work closely with Microsoft. You dedicate yourself to running on the Microsoft platform and spend time with building relationships with Microsoft. You go to their conferences, and you attend, and you find ways to build executive relationships. Again, you work to establish those three foundations: executive relationships, where you have people, because it's all about people. It's always all about people. You make sure your product together with the Microsoft products are better than either of them separately, and then you find ways to do things with the field where both field organizations can benefit. And it's a slow process. I mean, it's tough when you're starting out and you have nothing. But Microsoft won't pay a whole lot of attention to you until you become material at some fundamental level. Then they pay quite a bit of attention to you.
I don't want to keep you for too long, although I have like the running
How about
dog.
one more question? Why don't we just do one more question?
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so let's talk about data, since your book is about, it's called Datapreneur. What's the outlook on the AI/data landscape? Like, what are some startups that are doing interesting things in the space that you feel like people should pay attention to, or people are currently not paying attention to, but they're missing out?
Look, I mean, there's so much happening. AI is a whole new world. It's a world where there's capabilities that you can do that you could never do before. I mean, you now have intelligence in machines that we just never ever had. And I sort of separate the AI pieces into four different buckets. At least in the current world. This will evolve over time. There's the creative part of AI, where AI is doing summarization, it's doing writing, it's creating music, it's creating videos, pictures, things like that. That's working pretty well right now. We're seeing a lot of success with that. And certainly GitHub Copilot is an example of, and developer-oriented tools are probably the example of the most successful category. But I think whether it's in building marketing materials and things, people are doing a lot of successful stuff. There is the knowledge base, and building and using AI to actually ask questions of a knowledge base. That's an emerging category. It's still a little early there. Companies like Glean have done a good job. Perplexity has done a fantastic job of that on the internet. And we see companies begin to use AI to allow them to access the knowledge that they have in their company and answer questions instead of just providing a bunch of blue links. So that's sort of the second category. The third category is agents, and having AI do perform tasks on your behalf. That's pretty early right now. I'm not sure if we have a whole lot of examples of major success there, but there's a lot of investment going on. And I think over the next couple of years, we'll begin to see a lot of success emerging, where agents are going to take over more and more from users. And then there's the whole field of robotics, which I think is one of the most exciting potentials, where robots of all kinds are going to change the world in a material way, a very physical way. Probably the one that's been invested the longest is autonomous driving. That didn't work for a long time. Now it's starting to work. You see Waymo doing rides. They've got over 100,000 rides a week that they're giving. My Tesla drives itself. The damn thing, finally, it took forever. It didn't do this until this year, but now it takes me places and I don't have to do much. I'm stunned at how well it works. I think there's a lot of potential in robotics. So there's those four things. All right, Vinesh, you've been there the whole time. What do you want to ask? What question do you want me to answer for
Oh
you?
my God.
I'll let
See,
you answer the last question. I'll let you give me the last question. What do you want me to answer for you?
finish. Hi. See, the audience can always ask questions. Look at our guest, who is amazing, who is addressing these questions for us. So if Vinesh is going to take a minute, we will quickly wrap up with 1 minute fire round while he's generating the question. So what's your favorite book?
Share some books. Well, I
Oh,
love
well, okay,
he
so
did.
he said the same thing.
The
Share
oh,
some books.
that makes it look.
Right.
I wrote this all in my books. My favorite books are the Asimov robot novels. I grew up reading Isaac Asimov. He was an incredible influence on me early in my career. That guy was incredible. He was a prophet. In 1942, he invented the three laws of robotics. This was before the digital computer was invented. He had this concept of this positronic brain, which in a lot of senses is what our models are doing today. Very different technology, but a lot of our models are doing. And so to me, some of the ideas that he had were just unbelievable. And I loved all of his old books, and I actually reread a bunch of them over the last year and just really thoroughly enjoyed it. That's the old time stuff though. So
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
probably Paul Moritz, who is the guy that I worked directly for at Microsoft. Paul is and was an incredible leader. He ran the systems group that I worked for. I worked for Paul for over 10 years. I learned so much about values from Paul and a focus on building great products and listening to customers and working together with people. And Paul was incredible at working cross team and understanding how to make things work. Microsoft has a long sordid history of cross team challenges, but Paul was incredibly good at that and building bridges between people. It's all, in the end, the thing I would say, and this is the last thing I'm going to leave you with. This is one of the last things I said to Microsoft when I left Microsoft, which is, always remember that whatever your focus is at any given moment, whether you're focusing on building a product or adding a given feature or selling a given customer, whatever that is, that whatever that issue is that you're focused on today, that is the most important thing in the world to you today, don't let that issue burn a bridge with people, because the relationship with people will transcend that issue and still exist years and years, decades and decades beyond whatever that issue is. And the issue is long forgotten, but the relationship is more important. It's always about people.
Oh, I love that. I was gonna ask you who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who, what?
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Oh, I would love. My favorite two right now are Vivek and Elon. I would love to hear what they're up to and all this stuff. I think it'd be so interesting to see what these guys are about to do. They're going to do some very, very interesting things in terms of reducing the size of our government, which is something that I desperately think we need to do.
Where can we find you outside of work?
You can find me walking the dog, spending time with my family. Just trying to have a good time.
Amazing. Well, Bob, thank you so much for coming on the show today. You're just amazing to chat with.
Great. Thanks, Grace. It was good to spend time with you.
Thank you. Okay, let me quickly end.